So there has been let's say, viral video doing the rounds on Chinese social media and I assume in other parts of the region as well. And this has been reported in numerous sources, and it's obviously managed to get viral despite the best efforts of the Communist Party to censor it. But basically, it involves two women reporters, and they were covering the the party congress or the parliamentary hearing in Zhongnanhai in Beijing. So I'm just going to read out a little bit from Radio Free Asia. Like I say, there is different sources. This is by no means the only source, but I'll just read out a little bit of this because I think it merits a bit of commentary. The ruling Chinese Communist Party censorship machine has suppressed online discussion and reporting of a viral video showing a Chinese journalist covering the country's annual parliament roll her eyes in exasperation at a long-winded softball question asked by a colleague standing next to her. In the footage, reporter Liang Shengyi of Shanghai-based financial news service Yikai Media is seen looking at fellow journalist Zhang Huijun of a US-based TV station with ties to Beijing, then rolling her eyes, as Zhang asks a 45-second question remarkable only for its lack of challenge to the official it is aimed at, excuse me. Um, and this is the question. How will there be effective supervision for the assets of state-owned companies overseas so as to prevent capital flight? Zhang asks in a rambling question packed full of official media propaganda buzzwords, lauding President Xi Jinping's pet Silk Road International Infrastructure Plan, also known as Belt One Road. At one point, she refers to China as our country. Liang turns to look at Zhang, who works for a China-based station called American Multimedia TV, possibly wondering which organization she represents, before rolling her eyes in dramatic style at Zhang's sycophantic tone and turning away again. The video provided a rare moment of color in a heavily scripted environment of NPC press conferences, where TM questions are selected in advance from organizations friendly to Beijing and was immediately picked up as a meme, spawning several satirical reenactments, cartoons, and pop art designs for T-shirts and cell phone cases. But the Yang's expression also drew criticism from some in China's tightly controlled state media, amid reports from fellow journalists that the NPC press accreditation was revoked and that she could face further punishment. Journalists said Liang had been recalled by Yikai Media for investigation and self-criticism and was devastated by the backlash her eye roll, according to unconfirmed posts to social media chat groups. The Yang's name quickly became a banned keyword in Chinese social media sites, while the ruling party's propaganda department issued a directive to editors and journalists banning further coverage of the eye roll. Urgent notice: all media personnel are forbidden to discuss the NPC blue-suited reporter incident on social media platforms. Any posts already made must be deleted, a leaked directive published online by the US-based China Digital Times website said. All websites are to avoid hyping this incident. Okay, you get the idea. Now, I'm not going to lie, Radio Free Asia is biased. It's critical of authoritarian systems. Um, so you could say it's biased. But this, like I say, has been reported on other sites. I've seen the footage, and it's pretty explicit. And it's some sources are even calling it blue versus red because the two ladies have clear, um, vibrant blue and red suits, so it's easy to tell them apart anyway. The eye roll is quite explicit. It can't, it's not and there's no mistaking it. She definitely rolls her eye quite sarcastically. Now, you could say that she's being disciplined for being a bit rude to a fellow reporter, which I suppose it was. But I interpret it as many others are interpreting it, as a journalist kind of breaking through that very, very heavily censored, very tightly controlled um, dynamic you get within Chinese media, where journalists really have very, very little independence, very little. China still remains one of the countries with the least press freedom in the world. There's only a few that are worse: North Korea, Eritrea, some parts of Central Asia. But China is one of the countries with the absolute worst restrictions on press freedom. Um, so this is quite an interesting insight. I also think it hopefully will serve as a rebuke to some of those Chinese netizens who are always pointing fingers at Western media. Not so long ago, would have been about a year ago now, there was an incident where the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was speaking in Ottawa, Canada. I got quite involved in that because, well, I'll tell you the story in a second. But basically, a Canadian journalist was asking him some direct questions about human rights in China. Well, Wang Yi decided to have a tantrum and basically scolded the journalist for doing her job. Now, I noticed a lot of Chinese netizens rushed to his defense because this is always what happens. Somewhat similar to Russia, there are people who are basically paid to spread pro CCP lines online. And there are others who are just nationalistic and they say, how dare this pesky foreigner ask our minister these questions? Anyway, I defended the journalist and they turned on me. They said, oh, is she your girlfriend? Is she blah, blah, blah. I was defending her right as a journalist to ask a legitimate question. Also, it was within Canada, it wasn't even in China. So, in my opinion, Wang Yi was showing profound arrogance to scold the journalist when he was a guest in Canada. Anyway, they turned on me and said, oh, are you her boyfriend? I could very easily have turned on them and said, well, is Wang Yi your father? Is he your grandfather? You know, why are you so slavish to a Communist Party official? So there is a dynamic there. That's why I find this somewhat refreshing, the fact that Chinese netizens clearly can see through it. They can see what it's about. Um, was this journalist a little bit reckless with her eye roll? Perhaps she was. Maybe she didn't realize there was cameras looking in her direction. Some are interpreting or saying it's overblown. It's just a bit of cattiness between the two women. I don't know about that. I think maybe it could. I think it's plausible that this journalist Liang Shangyi has probably heard it one too many times, because this is the situation in China. Journalists are ultra polite. They basically just pander to what Politburo members want to hear. They never ever ask tough questions, and that's a fundamental difference between Western and Chinese media. So my message to those Chinese netizens who are always attacking Western biased Western media: okay, our media might be biased, but at least it's broadly speaking independent. Broadly speaking, it's not perfect, but at least, for example, the BBC will question British government officials. No one can say it doesn't, because it does. You just don't get the same situation with Chinese state media. It just doesn't do that. It panders the line of the Communist Party. So really, I think actually there are a lot of decent journalists in China who want to have more freedom. They want to be able to do the jobs properly, but they are restricted and they simply can't um, under the current authoritarian environment, which Xi Jinping is only going to increase with his extended. I have to laugh at Chinese media rebuking the West for, as they put it, doom mongering and cynicism. But when a strong man increases his term of office, it can only mean one thing: that he wants to keep a grip on power. You know, what we're seeing in the world right now is basically Xi and Putin are the equivalent of Stalin and Mao, or Mao and Stalin. Neither of them has killed half as many people, but both men are wielding the sort of power within their respective countries as Mao and Stalin did in their time. Um, and it's something that Western democracies need to be very, very wary of. I view China more or less the same as well, no, I shouldn't say the same, because I think Russia's more belligerent. And we have actually pretty good relations with China at the moment. But there's no escaping the fact there are fundamentally different ideals and different political systems. And so the golden era, well, I'm going to round up with